Homework 6.1, excuse me, number 7. We want to identify an equation for this. And the claim here is there's not a phase shift, right? There's no plus or minus a number inside here. And I can use sine or cosine, as we've seen in other examples. So what's going on with this one? Let's figure out the easiest thing to do, I think, is probably the amplitude and the midline here. So if we just identify some points. So it looks like I have for sure a maximum of 2. Come on, pen. There we go. And I have a minimum of -4. And so the midline's always right in between those. So we just add them up, divide by 2. Gives me -1. So I should see that -1 is the midline. Let's draw that in, see if it seems reasonable. Yeah, that looks like it slices it right down the middle. So y equals middle, -1 is the midline of this. That's our value for C. Oops. According to the way they wrote this above. The amplitude then is just the distance off of that. So if I add them up to find the midline and divide by 2, if I instead subtracted them, find the distance and cut it in half, that's always going to be the amplitude. So the amplitude, which we can also see in the graph, is going to be 2 minus -4 over 2. That's a distance of 6 top and bottom. Divide by 2 is 3. And so that right there is my amplitude A. We can see on the graph here, the distance from 1 up to 2 is 3. -1 down to -4 is also 3. So I have the amplitude. Next, we have to figure out the period. So we need a couple of points to find that. So there's a nice point sitting right here on the axis. And that's slicing through the y-axis like that, which means I would rather use the sine for this because that's what the sine normally does. So I don't have to worry about a shift. So this is a sine function without a shift. And then the question is, well, when does it go up through there again? Well, at this point over here, it goes up through there again. So then one complete cycle of this graph is between x equals -10 and x equals 0. So that's the period. And then we know the period is always 2 pi divided by that multiple, which they're calling k. And then to solve for k, we'll multiply k up, divide 10 down. So k is going to be 2 pi over 10, which is pi over 5 as my multiple. So I should be able to reproduce this graph by graphing y equals an amplitude of 3 times the sine of pi over 5 x, and then -1 to shift it down. Let's check it out. And so then again, the points I'm going to be looking for to verify this, I should have the point on that graph 0, -1. I should have the point -10, -1. Let's see, this max right there looks like it is, and I could verify that in a second. That looks like 2.52. And let's think about that. If the period is 10, that means half a period, like the distance to get to the peak and back to the midline, that should be 5, and I can see that on the graph. And right in between 0 and 5 is 2.5, which is where the max should occur. Yeah, that looks like the right point. Let's take a look on our graphing utility. And let's just reload this one. So I think it's y equals amplitude of 3 times the sine of pi over 5. And I could use the pi button on the calculator also. GeoGebra just leaves it as pi, which is fine. And then I put my x next to that. And then I want to subtract 1. And so let's see if I have the points I was hoping for. So I was hoping for the point 0, -1. If I scoot over here, I was hoping for the point, there it is. Oh no, over here, negative, oh, it's not going to give me the point easily. To get that point, I can just graph y equals -1. And then I can get that point right there of intersection. We'll play along, would you? There we go, intersect. All right. And tell me, oh, no, stop it. Back here, there's my -10, -1. Up here at the peak, it should just tell me that one if I click. 2.52. All right, so it looks like I got the right graph. Cool. Could I have used a cosine here? Yes, but I would have to have a phase shift, and this problem said no phase shift. So let's go back and double check that. Yeah, so notice there was no plus or minus inside. So for this question, although I could get that same graph using a cosine, I would have to add a phase shift, and this said, no, do it without a phase shift. Just give me these three numbers here.